And then when I stand up and screw around,
Well, but think back, were you carrying the motor down to the boat or what?
Not this year.
this year, one time, it was just for our outfits going overseas, we played battalion football. And it was touch football,
Oh,
but you
yeah.
can block and everything else in the army, see.
Right.
And I could throw pass longer and just as accurate. But there's a guy who could do it. He was from Holy Cross. He'd been out there. But I could catch him.
Okay.
He'd throw, and went right over the center from end position and caught that pass just as that 4x4 was right there. And that 4x4 hit me there, and it split my lips wide open. And I thought, my God, I've broken my arm and they'll go overseas and leave me. Well, I found out that wasn't true. But I can lay my finger right in where that hit me
Oh,
years ago.
Increased his muscle.
It did, and
well, you might have had a joint injury that's
I
talking
know
about.
these things,
Yeah, that's possible.
but
Show up 60 years later.
yeah, that's a long
Well, it could. Yeah.
Those things do happen, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm heating it and using
Ibuprofen.
ibuprofen.
Yeah, I've got a few of those that, you don't feel it so much sometimes. I mean, you don't feel that long-term debilitating effect. You think, well, it's worn off.
Yeah,
but
all good.
They start talking back to you. Stupid things, like climbing up trees when you're out hunting.
Oh.
Getting on little branches. Yeah. Yeah, I came out of one. Well, it was back over by Baraboo, Wisconsin, there where I usually hunt. And I was just walking back to the car. Sue was at the motel, and we had to check out at 12.
Mhm.
And I was walking back there, and all at once I spotted a tree stand I'd never seen before. And I looked, it's right on a major trail. This is a beauty. But it was abandoned, you could tell that.
Yeah.
There really wasn't much of anything. It was just some little twigs hammered into the tree that they'd climb up on and then sit up in the crotch of the tree there, probably about 13, 14 feet up. I said, I got to have a look at this, for next time. And so I took my pack and bow and I tied it on an equipment string, and you throw the string over that fork up there, and that hooks with a stick. And then when you get up, you can pull it all up, so you don't have to climb with all that stuff on there. So I skinnied up these little 1-inch branches, the steps. They're kind of rickety. And then just when I got to the fork, I had, left hand way out that way as far as I could go, and right hand to the other side, and then step on another one. And just at that point, the foot one broke.
The footman, dear.
Yeah, but that's not so bad, because I still got both hands on it.
Well, I know, but
Then the left one went. Then the right one went.
And there he went.
Yeah, I thought, oh, gee, this is kind of rude. I've done this before, and you hit on your ankles, and ooh, that smarts, for a while. You kind of hop around and curse a bit. I don't like these, but anyway, I guess I can do that one more time, And I'm going down. Because I was stretched out, I was going down on my back, backwards.
oh, were you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice.
And I saw this gold string alongside of me. Everything goes to slow motion then. I thought, oh no, that's my bow and arrows right under me. I'm falling right along the string. I said, well now, falling out of the tree is bad enough, but that is really embarrassing if you land on your own arrows.
Yes.
And so I looked over and I could see it over my right shoulder. And so I cocked my right leg back, and just when I got even, I gave a heck of a kick, and to kick it out of the way. And so it was falling. And boy, right after I kicked, there was just a loud noise, and everything went black, But I wasn't out, because right away I could, feel that discomfort of having the wind knocked out of you.
Yeah.
But still, everything was black, I mean, it was just, really, there was, nothing there, and I couldn't do much of anything, and then I started to remember from football, don't try to breathe, just, hold your breath and let your breathing come back, you can't fight it when the wind's knocked out, you gotta stop and then just slow breaths, slow, easy. And then I started becoming aware I was choking, like, geez, I got a mouthful of water or something. I bit my tongue.
Oh, you had?
Yeah. And then I thought, well, okay, now you do the check. Wiggle your left foot. Wiggle your right. And you're doing all this, in slow motion kind of thing. And I still couldn't see anything or, really hear anything. I was still in that tunnel. And all the extremities worked. And then I kind of rolled over because I was just uncomfortable, and coughing. Boy, this time you've really done it. You might not get out of this one so easy. Yeah, I'm out there alone.
You began to hunt, hoping somebody came by.
Yeah, finally I was crawling around, and I could see it. Then I started getting the light, and flashing light and stuff, and I could see, and I was crawling around. Where's my glasses? And I finally found a lens. And then I found a frame and a second lens.
Good night.
Yeah, put those back together. And I thought, I gotta get out of here. I think I can walk of sorts, but I don't think I can carry that equipment. Well, now wait a minute, I don't want to make another drive up here to come back for it. So I did take the equipment and get out of there. And I didn't, I knew it was a good fall. I went and picked up Sue and, getting in the car, I kind of had to hang on and move my carcass in because the muscles weren't answering like they should. And I didn't think a lot of it that day, except I just felt kind of punky, but I always had the sensation my heartbeat and my breathing weren't in sync, Finally I went to the clinic, well, the emergency room, about 8 o'clock. And I actually did all the tests, for broken spleen and blood work and everything. Nothing. And he said, well, you might have cracked some ribs, but we're not going to x-ray for that because you don't do anything for it anyway.
No, you don't.
No. So they just sent me home, but, a fall like that makes you think twice about climbing trees.
I'll bet it does, doesn't it?
But
Reminds you
it's
that
that
you're no
same
kid
old
anymore.
thing, I didn't think I had any injuries from it. And we were at an AER conference a week later, and I was alone. I was just at this conference booth, and something was bothering me. And so I had this really good sneeze, and I just, since there's nobody around, I let out a good, healthy sneeze. And all those ribs and stuff on my back, I just went down to my knees, There I was, just almost laying down again from a sneeze. And you always wonder, if you land on your back and your neck like that, you could get some
You could have
later, maybe when I get to be 105 or so, it's going to be a little stiff up there.
I wouldn't wonder.
Well, anyway, that's the price of venison in Wisconsin.
Did you ever get any venison today?
Not that day.
Not
no.
that day.
Yeah.
Oh, this year, though, we've got quite a year coming up because the herd is out of control.
Well, they are everywhere.
Yeah, so they,
Not just there, here, east.
yeah.
Anywhere.
You're right. I think this
Yeah.
year, just because there's been so much rain and growth and everything, when that happens, the does have twins and triplets commonly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, they know that conditions are primed to raise them.
Yeah.
They're what?
Conditions are primed to raise them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I got my license, there were 4 free tags in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how much they want to knock it down.
Mm-hmm.
And on the bottom it said, "Thank you for doing your part to help control Wisconsin's deer herd."
Is that? Yeah, yeah. Gee whiz.
Right.
Gosh. Well, Mike, where you live?
South of Detroit Lakes, about 12, 13 miles.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
okay.
It's out right off of 59 goes by the east end of Pelican Lake.
Okay.
And Pelican Lake is about 9 miles long.
And it's a big
nice
lake,
Oh,
I know,
mhm.
yeah, it's a big lake.
It's a nice big lake.
And it's a nice lake, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yes, it is.
Good, lots of good beaches on it.
Yeah.
I don't remember your lake being this big.
Well-
Actually, Stocking Lake is a good-sized lake.
Well, it's
We
got
used to say 350 acres, which isn't.
a bay there and a bay up the other
But
end.
there's a bay up there,
Mhm.
Okay.
and then when you go on south, another one down there. And so, but this is the largest part, all right.
Yeah.
My boat that I had, I just gave it to somebody. He's been a good friend, he does things for us and all that kind of stuff. He's got multiple sclerosis, so he didn't use it much, I know he, but he's got some kids. But it's right across the lake, if you went across here, it wouldn't take you,
Oh, yeah.
it wouldn't take you 5 minutes to run across the
So
lake.
it's about 4 miles around.
But it's 4 miles, it's, yeah, oh, it's, yeah, it's at least
all of
that.
that. Oh, yeah.
You had to
More.
get that around. But what the heck, he's here, he lives here, and
If we ever,
don't use it.
if anybody's here and wants it, we can always go get it.
And just go across it and get it.
Let's step out a minute. I want to take a gander at
Let's
that.
take it.
Yeah. All the good old days. Riding on through the intercourse behind the boat.
See, for pain, that's all. That's all they got.
Sure.
Sure, and so I just, some of them are a little bit curative too. The Motrin, I call it, I can't think what else it's called. That I happen to have because they prescribed it
Oh.
some time back. But the damn stuff isn't strong enough to knock that out, really. And so I don't quite know. Hell, it doesn't interfere with my, maybe I'm hurting it, but it doesn't really hurt, you know, my hands are fine.
Well, Russ, can you tell me a little bit about that injury from the war?
Yeah. I was with light artillery, and 105s, but no size. I don't know how long they are, but it was, and we're actually part of the infantry. They might not think so, in the infantry division, and so we are right there with them, and we went a little far up. We had come out of Normandy in France. This is 1944. Went in on the D-Day invasion. Not on D-Day, but what was the Omaha Beach.
Oh, you went into Omaha
Yeah,
Beach.
we went on Omaha
Okay.
and made a wet landing. You had to go in waterproofed and something, but it was not D-Day, it was later than that. But going up over the hill, which is a big thing, then moving to the west, the Germans were right over there, see. Well, anyway, it was about 7 weeks, and we kept moving west along shore. And then it was noontime, and I had been up in the battalion command post, because that's my job. I was an operations sergeant, and I had a platoon of fire direction and survey and liaison with the infantry in that platoon of mine. Well, anyway, not much had been going on that morning. But as I got my K ration from the truck, and went out through an orchard just to find some place to eat. Stuff began to come in, artillery stuff, see.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I was out there and then I got hit, and I knew I was hit. But I was conscious, at least as much as I am today, and so on. Well, I was near a truck, and I knew a guy was there by that truck, and I asked him, well, my glasses, I wore glasses, had gone everywhere. I knew right there that right eye was gone. It was still knocked out, but this I didn't know about. I didn't know about this.
About the shoulder.
No.
Okay.
But then I said to this fellow, "You hit?" And he said, "No." And I said, "I am. And will you tell the medics as soon as you can let them know when that firing lets up?" Well, he went right now and got them, and those medics are out there before you could say Jack Robinson. Well, I have talked to the two guys that pulled me out from the edge of that truck since. They told me, yeah, they yanked me out of there. But you know, Mike, I was bleeding terribly so, down my throat, because injured across through here, see all these.
And you could feel the blood?
Oh yes.
Oh, yeah.
It went down through, and I remember in the aid station, which was not far away, as far as from here to the dock,
Uh-huh.
and I vomited blood around and so on. And finally then, apparently they got it stopped, but also they gave me plasma. Well, I had studied physical ed and anatomy and that stuff in college and so on. I said to Smitty, he was a medic, "That plasma?" And he said, "Yes." Well, you know, I had felt laying flat like this, it's kind of hard not to feel a little detached. And I did. I remember saying to Doc Bruiser, I knew him quite well, I said, "I feel a little bit funny." I think it probably worried Doc, and rightly so, because I would hit hard. Well, then Smitty was giving me this plasma, because I asked him, and I said, "You know, I feel better." I did. I felt better. A little bit that. And then they got me all wrapped, everything but my mouth, because the nose was busted. See, I'm busted up.
Oh, yeah.
And so I could breathe. Mike, the doctor, Doc Bruiser, he was over in Jersey, and I talked to him a number of times. We used to get cards back and forth. He told me he didn't think I'd live.
Wow.
He didn't tell me at the time.
Of course
He
not.
told me later when Gene and he and I were very good friends and that sort of thing. Smitty, one time, we didn't communicate so much with Smitty, the medic. He'd been in my platoon once before he moved over to the medics. I knew Smitty real well. And I wrote to him just for no reason, and he got a letter back from his wife, and she said, "Yes, Smitty's told me." And he also told me that he didn't think you'd live, too.
Wow.
So, see, they didn't think so. And, so it was, then I was evacuated. But you know, I didn't go from here to that, I didn't go a quarter of a mile from when they loaded. I began to think funny things, and I thought they had taken me out with an ambulance. Well, years later I thought we didn't have any ambulance in the battalion. And I talked to Smitty. I met him in Pittsburgh once. And I said, "How did I get out of there?" He said, "On a Jeep. We loaded you on the back of a Jeep and went out with you." "How'd you know?" He said, "I was driving." Out to, now there were, Mike, there were 4 guys, they were pretty good friends of mine.
Uh-huh.
They got killed right just within,
Right on the spot. Yeah.
within just no time. of the time I was injured.
You guys were taking real heavy artillery that day.
It was coming, and we had gone a little bit too far up.
Okay.
And we knew that then, and they moved out later, went back some. But also, I had spent the morning plotting, and plotting enemy artillery positions. We'd get an overlay.
Sure.
And they were all over creation, see. Well, they didn't have that much artillery, the Germans. Nobody did. It was moving, see. This, and maybe it was one mobile artillery piece.
And they were
Or
moving.
maybe it was a couple,
They were moving it around.
but they were moved it around.
Sure.
And to keep us from getting any fix on them.
Yep.
And it was that did it. And they undoubtedly had a pretty good fix on where we had moved in the
Yeah.
night before.
They had your position.
We had our position.
Sure.
And then once they were quite sure we had taken that position, they began to layer in there.
Yeah.
I'd been under artillery before, a number of times, but there's a guy, OC, you might not meant for me to talk about this, but it was back earlier, it was over in Normandy, someplace. And we were dug in, which was usually the case, and it was a blackout tent, because it was a command post for the battalion. I was in there. O.C. Dunlap was a guy from Western Tennessee, an awfully nice fella. And he was a driver. And he'd been put on the guard out around there. Jesus, they were shooting, and the other guys, and I said, Dunlap! Yeah, he had a shaky voice all the time anyway. He said, yeah. I said, did you get hit? No. I said, come on in here, the hell of that guard doing? You come in and get in here. So he came in, and he said, here, and he handed me a piece of I think it was brass. It was about probably that long, that wide, but the most jagged thing you can imagine. I think you could shave with it.
Oh.
And he said that fell out of the tree and him on the leg. After he was cooled off to where he could pick it up, he brought it in and showed
Oh,
it to me.
gee.
Now imagine if that thing hit you.
Well, yeah.
It could just tear you to pieces.
Yeah.
Charlie Lysett was the captain, and I knew Charlie. We still do. We stop and see him in Florida a number of times. And I was standing up on a hedgerow, and they'd be, sometimes, well, almost, it was where the fences had just been built up, and on top were bushes and trees and stuff like that. Well, anyway, and I was standing up there. It was early in the morning, and I had been up most of the night. And Lysett had he had a hole, slit trench in his tent over it. And he got up out of there. He saw me up here, and he kind of laughed. He kind of grinned and smiled and pointed back at his tent, and the goddamn thing was full of holes. During the night, something, and these artillery fragments, and what do? You might as well smile and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And later on, and you know, there's some heroism in this whole thing too.
Sure.
Charlie Lysett was a liaison man, and that meant he was right up there front with the infantry, and right there. And he'd have about 3 guys with him, radio operator and wireman, somebody else. But anyway, what they did was a German Tiger tank, by God, pretty much big as this house. Not as big as this house, but the biggest damn thing the Germans had was out there. And boy, they're mean. And they would shoot about a 4-inch shell.
Wow.
See, wait a minute. They shot an 88, and that was so fast that you never could hear them before it hit you,
Sure.
because they were terribly fast. But anyway, and Lysa, he told me this later, but somebody else told me too. Lysa, they were shooting up everything out there, this German bunch. He was out there. So he sent his radio man, whose name gets away from me, I can see him, but he sent these guys back and he stayed out there with his radio. And by Jesus, before they get done, they shot Charlie Lysa right. Let me see if I get this right. Somewhere around the eye. It didn't kill the site, the eye killed the musculature, and it came out back here.
Oh my gosh.
And by God, he was in the hospital for a year and a half, but he's as fine and prosperous down there in Florida. He's fine.
Wow.
But he sent his guys back. Now that, by God, that's quite a...
He sent his guys back?
Got him out of the danger.
He
sent
got him out of
back
the... Wow.
that danger.
After being hit?
No, it was before he, then he stayed out there and he got himself hit.
Okay.
Well now, the Germans picked him up then, and he was prisoner. But the medical treatment they gave him was fine. It was good. Otherwise he died, see. They were, I know of other cases where the Germans would pick them up and their medical services do just the best they could do. Then when the Germans who were falling back knew that the U.S. soldiers would be in there real quick, they would leave him in a place they knew would be picked up. And Charlie was picked up by the our medics. Now that's that. Charlie was a hero in that time. Hell, nobody knows it but Charlie, and he told me, I don't know anybody else knows it. I think that's heroism.
Well, I
Huh?
think you're right.
And
Everybody else is getting these late medals.
all the firing and everything else. But he was a prick. No other word for it. See? Well, anyway,
Yeah.
he thought he wanted to go up and just get this right from the infantry side of it. So he's up there. And this guy, Colonel York, was in command of the regiment up there. He was going up, and York had been in Africa, in Sicily and all around. See? And in comes some kind of a round. It was coming somewhere from the German. And this major I was talking about, he ran about 15 feet and he dove into leaves and scratched around. York and his staff boys were over here and they never moved. See? Then York, whose voice carried, see, he was a West Pointer, his voice had carried, he said, "You're going to have to judge him better than that, Major." That's a story. I would give $10 for that story because I hated that damn guy. That guy. Off to the left, there was a road came through, and it was a lane. That was a two-lane blacktop, I suppose it was. Yeah. Down there is where the Germans are, down there. Well, I happened to be looking over here for no reason, and something went kabang. And there was a tree, so I don't know if that tree might have been that big around, don't know. But it was standing 10, 12 feet high, just that much. And that tree went just like, I'm going to try to do it. It was just like, bam, straightened up. That shell had landed right close.
Whoa.
And it just took that tree, I swear that tree went as near to the ground, and it didn't break. And it went back up.
And it has that much force.
Yeah. And if I hadn't been looking right at the time, I'd have missed it because wherever the shot was fired from, that shell would come much faster
Yeah,
than the sound would come.
sure.
It was, I used to know what the trajectory speed was, but I don't anymore. But you couldn't hear them when they they'd be on you and explode.
Too quick.
Crack. What was it? I've been in 4 hospitals. A French hospital, I never knew anything about that. Then, and in Rennes, I think it was. Then I went to another U.S. hospital. It was the Evac hospital in Granville, France. And then I was evacuated by airplane. I think it was C-47. Those
Yeah.
2-motor things,
Uh-huh.
I think, probably, to England. And I was at 67th, I think, was the hospital. Now, it was a major hospital overall, and this incision was there.
Mm.
Now, I didn't know a thing. They just, the only thing I know about being there, the fella said, we're putting this business over your head. Just breathe deeply. And boy, I was hurting so bad. Didn't hurt at all when I was hit. Not a bit. No. Didn't hurt a bit. But boy, later it hurt. And,
Yeah.
and I wondered, I would have sucked in anything. But here, that sort of thing, and then he reconstructed up here at 67th hospital. And then I went to the 125th, and I was there by the 4th day after I was injured. Now, that's moving you pretty fast.
Yeah, that's a lot of movement.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And then I began to be lucid. Then I began to know what was going on. Then began that terrible thing of wondering about that left eye.
Mhm.
Boy, oh boy. Because if you don't, you're going to be a blind man, and that's hell.
No future at all.
No future.
That's right. Everything's out the window.
Yeah, it's all done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Because that was the state of blind rehab at that time.
That was the state.
We didn't have anything.
and it was, yeah, we didn't have it. And I wouldn't have known anything about it anyway. And it was the most dreaded, according to what we used to read,
Yeah.
statistically speaking, or polls, or whatever it was, that except for cancer, blindness is most feared, most dreaded
Mhm.
condition that mankind could get.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that, and so on. But how do you ask? Because, boy, if you ask, you may find out that you were right. You're going to be blinding. Well, and the doctor that was coming around and working on this, and I was taking penicillin because they didn't want me to give it. Didn't want me to. It was so deep in here. They didn't want a brain infection.
Yeah.
What do they call it? Well, anyway, he'd come right. He was a very nice person. But you know, I think he was smart as a whip, young man. I think he realized that that was bugging me. And he was doing this, and then he changed the dressing. And that one, he'd do this, and he'd explain what he was doing. I said, what about that left one? Trying to act as though I wanted to see if he's cleaning it up or something.
Uh-huh.
He said, Sergeant, I don't have a thing to work with. Oh, boy. Boy, oh boy. No guy in the ring ever got hit any harder than that. I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed, I'll tell you what, he was a remarkable man. He explained that. Then he stayed right there. He didn't run.
I think a lot of guys would have.
Yeah, a lot of them did.
Yeah.
A lot of them did. He didn't run, he stayed right there. And he said, and I think this was really a marvelous thing, a real artistry, I think. He said, I made an arrangement with the nurse who's chief nurse of this number of wards right here close at hand, to sit with you when your food comes so you get used to handling food when you can't see. Then he said, I'm going to, I've got a cane fixed up for you. And I said, I don't know much about the use of it, that sort of thing, but he said, I'm gonna put some tape around the end of it, or I had done it, so that it won't hurt things that you hit or people you hit. Then he said, now there is a place where people that have your situation go when they're returned to the United States. Now he said it's at some historical place, and he said I haven't got the information. It could be Gettysburg, it could be, he might have named Valley Forge. I don't know. But you know, that was, when I say, from there on, I knew that I wasn't going to be alone in this business. And so, at least, I'll tell you guys, I got to be a pretty good traveler in later on in this whole program, and knew the technique. But you know, I didn't travel 10 feet by myself between the 10th of August and the 15th of September when I left England, because I didn't know how.
And they probably wouldn't let you in.
Well, probably would. But the bathroom wasn't far, but it didn't mean a thing. Turns and twists and everything. And
When did you first meet up with Hoover?
I met Dick, well, let's see, I got to Valley Forge on the 7th of October
Okay.
in 1944. I probably found out that Dick was somebody around there. I suppose it might have been 10 days, might have been a week.
Okay.
I don't know. I just don't know. He had quite a lot of guys working for him, corpsmen, and would come and check, about how you knew how to handle your breakfast or your lunchtime, or we had a locker there we could put stuff in, and what'd you know about that? They were just around, and I'll tell you, and a guy did come and give me a cane after I'd been there a couple of hours, 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon on Saturday. And what they had, Rod, was a rubber runner all the way down through this double ward.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it was just as wide as the door
Sure.
going out of the ward. Well, what he showed me with this cane was about that long. Somebody had given it to him out of the closet.
Huh.
And all I had to do was go around the foot of the bed and put my cane on the edge of that runner, and went down here about 15 feet, and I hit the edge of the door frame, and then just 3 feet was the one into the latrine. The cane's right here. And then when I came out, then I just slide and get the other side. Well, then now I got to guess
How far?
when to turn off.
Okay.
That was no easy proposition.
No?
But anyway, I got to know Dick after a while. And he probably worked some with me. I remember he did as we went along, but I don't know how soon.
Mm-hmm. Was he teaching the moving it left to right about shoulder width at that time?
No, he couldn't have been. Well, yes, he was doing that, all right. But, and this I know, absolutely I know. They didn't have any canes of any unusual length. The longest that they had would be the weight-bearing cane. You know, the white, red-tipped deal. Then they had others that people had donated. See, they didn't have any of the metal canes that Bledsoe, they thought they did, but that's his memory was. But they didn't. Bill Thompson, for instance, never had one. He never had one of those canes.
Well, I remember reading something about a place called Summerall Tubing.
Well, they
That's
did,
where they got
finally,
some
yeah.
early ones.
Well, he did that. Now let's see. I came in October. I was around in May of '45. Now I had been at Valley Forge what, October, November, December. I'd been there 7 months. Then I went up to Avon. See. Then probably somewhere in the middle of the summer is when Hoover got Summerall Tubing to provide those canes.
Oh, okay.
See. But I was long gone from Valley Forge.
You were up at Avon Old Farm.
Uh-huh,
So,
uh-huh.
how long were you at Avon?
I was there from, let's see, oh, pretty near 4 months.
Okay.
Very close to 4 months. Uh-huh. And of course, now I took a cane with me to Avon, but I didn't use it because we were just not supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was up in the locker or somewhere, I don't know. The reason I'm pretty sure I kept it in the locker because I think I had it when I was finished. Yeah, but they didn't do it. So it was the program, that was protocol to go without any external aids of any kind.
So you
Those
learned
canes.
more about spatial concepts and
Yes.
sensory awareness and that
Uh-huh.
stuff. Yeah.
I don't think the guys up there, Rod, were terribly knowledgeable on that stuff. But we would get out and practice certain things and going around. I remember Al Blackbird, who really ran the place, he was director of training and everything else. He finally came out and he wanted to check on me. Now, I was unusual in this sense. I was going back to Valley Forge. And I knew it. I had that appointment already. But anyway. But also, I was pretty good. My hearing has always been good. Yeah, even last time I had it checked at the hospital with their machines and all their stuff. And the guy, I said, am I up to normal for my age? He said, you're a little better than normal. That guy, audiologist, and I was told he was a damn good one. Anyway, I don't know how you, well, I guess you're supposed to fade away as you age.
That's right. Hearing goes down for most people.
Yeah, well, at least he was surprised at that. And because he had given me the test for what I wanted, I told him that across the streets and so on, I'd like to know whether my hearing was accurate.
Okay.
And so he did it on that basis. Well, anyway, now where was I?
Well, I was going to, when you mentioned about the hearing,
Oh, yeah.
Tom Blosh told me one time, and I was still at Western then, so it was like 1961. He said that you used to be able to stand there on the street outside of Heinz and a car go down the boulevard, and you'd point out even the little trees as the car went by. You could tell the sun shadow on every tree as it went down the boulevard.
Yes, I don't know how big the trees would be, but I do know that they didn't teach anything like that around Old Bull Farms or Heinz, but I learned it by accident because when Gene and I had an apartment on 4th Avenue, and I had to go about 2 blocks to get to the bus, which was in a filling station, see. You came up Gay Street and turned, and the filling station's right in here. Well, there was a place where people could sit. It was a place, what did I say? There was an island out here
Okay.
with a stone seat or something of the kind, I don't know, out there. Well, anyway, and I'm waiting on the bus here, see, but I'd hear these semis going by, and right there that sound would be interrupted, and then it would continue. And here comes another guy, and that sound's interrupted, and it's right there. Well, then there comes a time when I'm around there, and I thought, I had checked with somebody, what is that? And then later, while I was standing there and nothing doing, the guy went by and I walked out and right there it was. It began to get the sound interruption. I think that must have been what Don was talking about.
Mhm. Yeah, no, he said you were even doing that on the trees that we would call saplings.
I
you know,
see,
about as
could
big as
be,
your arm.
could be, because it might have been. It might have been because my hearing was good. And,
Well, you guys put together, I mean, you and Warren and Dick, and you put together a program, I guess Kate Gruber and Father Carroll, I mean, everybody was along somewhere in that picture, but you did something that had never been done before. I mean, you pulled something together, it was a quantum jump where you were addressing the whole idea of a guy being independently mobile, crossing streets with and without traffic signals. And there were very few blind persons and hardly any programs before that time that were teaching this or that had the idea this could be achieved.
yes, you're right about that. And there's so many of those people, the old timers around, and I got, because it was a favorable place to be. Peter Salmon was up at Old Farms at times, and maybe others, and so on around Valley Forge. Who was the deafblind lady? Helen Keller. Lots of people parading through and so on, but I knew it was pretty much I was a neophyte. But you know, they didn't have any program at Valley Forge. They just really couldn't, because it was surgery, the need for surgery dominated. So some travel would be given because the guys would need to get up to the treatment room and other things, and maybe down to clinic. But then he would have to go to surgery. You just couldn't set any sequential thing to make it work. There's no way. But I don't know why they were thinking that way. Because I just don't quite think that their aim was that high at Valley Forge. But if a guy had built up a success pattern was sequential, he was ready to get out of there for Avon. Okay. He was gone. Well then, when we went out to Hines, and there was none of the old goats around except Bledsoe would be their son. Dick came out, he's probably out there 3-4 times in the time that I was around. Dick wasn't there much. Stan said he was there about maybe 3 times a day at a time. They didn't pay attention to him. If you talk to Stan now, and if he had said, did Dick pass along anything, if Stan would say no.
Okay.
I think he would say it, he says it to me, but I don't think he wanted to downplay Dick or anything of the kind, but their taking of directions at street crossings and things of this kind, they just haven't reached it. And
what about the idea of a special program for the blind, the 16-week program you guys set up? Was it General Hawley that gave that the okay? Was he the one that cut the red tape? I mean, how did that get set in place where it was accepted?
Well, I'll tell you, it was about a 16-week thing or maybe 17-week at Avon.
Okay.
Valley Forge was, might have been 5 years if Valley Forge had stayed open that long. But so that, we're not talking about that. That was, now, I don't know who up at Avon said it. I have a hunch. Father Carroll was a figure up at Avon.
Okay.
So he might have been in on setting a period of time. Well, because we didn't know any better, we kind of, when we were Hines now, we sort of accepted that to begin with. Then we gradually learned that man had had enough success ordinarily going along, that it began to be competition between staying there and having more success and going home, because home had changed a lot in his view during the time he was there.
Sure.
And he was ready to go. Well, the only time we would argue if he had some unusual thing that caused us to want to keep him a little longer.
Mhm.
And I had a number of fellas who would get mad at us, would say, I want to go home. Well, I can remember the guy at Portland, Oregon, and he had been hit awfully hard in the forehead. See, he had loss of affect,
Oh,
yeah, and
sure.
sort of thing. And he had, his temper was short. And he took it out on me quite a bit. But I could think of it. He'd say, I want to get out of here. And so I said, well, let me see. Now you know about a cake. You can bake a cake. And you can eat that cake. But you got your cake made pretty well. But a cake isn't good unless you get it covered with frosting or what do you put on a cake. You just haven't got the frosting yet, and I ain't gonna let you go. If he'd have said I'm going anyway, he could have, but he wouldn't do it. Then I'd figure about a week, maybe a little longer. I'd come in some morning. Jim, or whatever his name was, wants to see you again. I think he wants to go in again. So we held him, see, to get the final touches on it.
Mhm.
Another will illustrate it. I can't think of his name, that's not important. But he was a fella from southern Indiana, down where Hanover College is, I can't think of, Madison,
Okay.
right on the river. And he came in to see me. And he was well along, doing very nicely. And just a fella, a stone blind fella, all right. But not with any hearing disorder or legs off or anything like this. So anyway, he said, now look, I'm from Madison. Yes, I know where it is. I've been down there. He said, and I'm going to live there. He said, I've lived there all my life, you will live there all my life. And I don't see any point in my going down into the loop now. He said, I just don't think that's going to fit into my life and so on. Well, if I thought you were going to live in Madison, Indiana the rest of your life, I'd go along with you. But I don't know that that's the case.
Mhm. We saw that in Vietnam too.
But you did, didn't you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
They just came from a little village and they didn't see why they should travel in downtown Saigon. But we knew that there were no jobs in the villages,
Sure.
unless they're going to work in the rice fields. So they all went through the downtown travel. Then after that, they could make their decision. They had enough
Then they could make it,
information.
couldn't they?
Yeah.
I was around there in the office and rang the bell or whatever she did. And it was, can't think of his name very good. And it was this guy. He'd been out about, I'd say, 9 months, something like that, I don't know. And I said, where are you? He said, I'm in Chicago. Well, I said, oh. I didn't know whether he was out in Madison or up here. I'm in Chicago. I'm moving up here. He said, I'm getting married up here. I didn't say to him, I told you so.
Yeah.
No, that would have been unethical. I didn't tell him I told you so, but he knew.
Yeah.
Huh?
There was a situation like that in the Long King movie.
Was it?
Yeah, where Charlie bumped into the tree. He wasn't covering himself with the cape, and he banged the tree, and he was all mad. And so you went in his room to listen to him, and boy, he said, why do they have trees in the middle of the sidewalk?
I remember that.
And I do too. You said, yeah, I know, Charlie. They should take away all the fire hydrants and the bus stops and everything. And then you just kind of patted him on the shoulder as you were leaving, and you said, You better save your energy, Charlie, you're gonna need it.
And say, there was a lady who had been the chief social worker in the VA, but at the end of World War II, some veteran displaced her. But she was an old timer and a good one, and so on. But she told me, she said she had listened to that movie, and she said, now he had run into the tree, and he was about ready to chuck the whole works. And he and I had talked about it, and so on. And then the movie had a beautiful display of what he had been confronted with back home. People running his life, making decisions for him.
That's right.
He ran through that. Then he'd come back and think about these sidewalks with street crossings that are dangerous and tough. And then he would think again about those people back home running his life. And this lady, this social worker, said, I was sitting there all nervous. I was rooting for him to come out. The next day he showed up for his travel. And
Oh,
you
yeah.
knew he was over the hump.
Yeah, oh, I remember that. They all stood there at the station wagon waiting for him to show up. And they thought he wasn't coming. They were just getting in, and the door slams, and there's Charlie coming out.
That was, yes, and that was the story, and that, and my gosh, those, oh, then we have these drop-offs
Mm-hmm.
later. Oh, I'll tell you, back up on that a little bit. I think I brought that sequential thing to Hines, because it hadn't been true at Valley Forge. They couldn't do it, even if they thought of it.
Right.
Well, and they didn't do it at Avon in any sequential way, because things you'd have one, like gardening for a week, orientation, and orientation was pretty much a case of orientation and not really mobility. You just was learning the surroundings. Yeah, that was all. But anyway,
After I had observed that process for a while, it appeared to me it was success built upon challenge.
it was success based on challenge. That's well put. Yeah. And we started off with that, and of course Stan, Ed Meese, Bud Thues, and Dee. Bud was not as smart as the rest of them, but Stan was splendid,
Mm-hmm.
unbeatable really, and Eddie was a good man.
Yeah.
He'd do by rote more than Stan would, and Dee was smart. My God, he was a smart guy, and could, and so on. But anyway, so we had it going sequentially. Starting particularly, now this, I had learned at Valley Forge that inside, you've been through this, indoors, and this is a big hospital, you do cross-body stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, you're outdoors and you start doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember the first day I was to do this outdoors, and Dick Hoover and I went down. We got dumped over on Main Street, and I was to go from right to left, and I was not. The next thing you know, I slipped and went off the curb over here, and I got enough of that. Next thing, to stay away from that curb, I was up here. The next thing, I was going up and run into the person's steps up here. So I was drifting. And it wasn't long because Dick Hoover was a tech sergeant, so was I, and we had some words. Yes, we did. And I just, because I hadn't had any opportunity to learn that this was a security factor, so that I could listen down in front. But you see, so we started with the cane right away. I mean, wig wagon.
Sure.
We started right away, and to do it. And Always thought that was right.
Well, that,
Once he stepped out, he was ready. The outdoors, I mean.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
I've looked at that thousands of hours, Russ.
I bet you.
If a guy has his hand perfectly in center, and he has an equidistant arc from left to right, and his timing is correct, there's no way you can beat it.
You can.
It's gonna work 1,000%.
I believe it will. I believe it will. And you looked at it both as a user and as a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it as a teacher, but as a user.
No, I could easily see if a guy was overarching on the left, he was gonna clip on the right.
Yeah.
And if he was out of time, he was gonna step over it or behind it. One of the two. Everything was exactly as it was taught. And you guys put that down in manuals. You wrote it step by
yeah.
step.
I know we did, and those guys spent hours. Well, we had a half hour there at night when the guys had to put stuff down because it was necessary to keep notes in order to fill up the clinical record.
Mm-hmm.
And they did this. They'd be in there, but each day there would be something new that would emerge. And somebody'd say, let me tell you what I had happen to me today. There's something new, huh?
Yeah.
Isn't it something new? And Lee Farmer put that down nicely too. He said to me one time that he had a gal from Western who came over. And as an intern, whatever they called him, he said, now look, at 4 o'clock, you go over into this room. Now you might hear a bad word once in a while, I don't know whether you will or you won't. But he said, you're gonna learn more over there. These guys.
Sure.
And because just like with that tree business, and so the guys were putting these things down. And you know, Rod, we had lots of people. Well, quite a few people that came to visit us for periods, a day, a week, 2 weeks, and so on. Then they would want our lesson plan. And they never could give them to them. Ours were built around the community of Hines and other places. It wouldn't have done a bit of good.
Right.
And if they hadn't been there long enough to understand this sequential thing upon which that building was built, well, it wouldn't have been good anyway, so it wouldn't do it.
It would have been misused.
It would have been, I'm sure it would.
Yeah.
It would have been misused, and but that was a continuing process. I believe as long as, well, it was certainly as long as I was around.
Yeah.
It was a continuing process.
Do you think it was part of your teacher training or your teacher experience that you were setting things out in great detail? You would set down the steps to each lesson plan?
I sort of think so. I think the sequential part of it was a part of it at the beginning. I know that I didn't care for certain things at Valley Forge and didn't care for certain things at Avon, but I was not the kind who would be critical of it. There was no position to do that. But I knew that it had to be a step-by-step thing. The next step a little more challenging and dependent upon what you've learned in this step beforehand. That's the thing that one ought to have learned in teacher training. And I think I probably did some of that. And I can remember coaching too, of catching fellow doing certain things. Of course, they played basketball before I ever saw them. But it would be a case of a left-hander who couldn't do anything with his right hand. And after a while, getting to know him and getting to show him how that could be done. It was not quite the same thing, but along the same line. And
that you couldn't show them too much in one lesson.
no, you can't show him too much in one lesson. And these these, as we went along, and the fellows that we had were from, well, we had more as the Korean War came along. We had more fellows from more places in the country, some out in the rural areas and so on. And so we needed to add things like those things that would represent the rural areas. And, oh gosh, I don't know. But I can remember one of them that fitted into the sequence were the drop-offs. And I can remember this, Rod, I was at Valley Forge working. And now I had traveled to New York and Philadelphia and Chicago and loads of places by myself and so on. But I can remember this. Fran Smith was a very prominent person down the main line in West, but she was also a volunteer and a very well thought of and everything else. She said, she was there that particular day, and she said, "You're going home?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "I'm going up into Phoenixville. Want to ride?" I said, "Sure." I rode the bus every day, see. So I rode up there and told her where to turn here. We went up on what was called Nut Road, and it's an old Revolutionary Avenue out there and so on. And I said, "The minute you top this hill here, then you will find a half left, and you just go up through there. And then when you come to the first cross street, I'll just get out. I just live right." Okay. So we went up over the top of this thing and half left, and she came to this first cross street. She stopped, and I said, "I live right there." And she says, "In that barn?" And I said, "No, is there a barn there?" Yeah, what she had done, she had turned up an alley. See, that was the first turn. And I thought, listen, we got to do something about guys who get picked up and dropped off when they don't know where they are, and so on.
Sure.
And so Ed Heinrich he was a good man. He was pretty well along too in the program. And Ed and I got along very, very well. And I said to Ed, "I'm going to have you do something, and I'm not going to tell Larry what you're doing," because Larry was looking out after Ed. So it was like this. He'd go. Now Larry, all he had to do was follow Ed, and Ed went over the railroad platform, over to Hines, got the bus, went up to St. Charles, got off, crossed Northwestern tracks, a little over a block to Lake Street, caught the Lake Street bus, went east, told the driver to let him off at, I've forgotten the street, but it was way down there. And he got off and he crossed the lake, and that's a gnarly. Then he went a block and a half or so, and about the third house, and then he went up the sidewalk and rang a doorbell or pounded on it, and it was Gene's cousin, see, Pat Peterkin. And I hadn't told Pat but that Ed was coming, and she came and introduced herself and so on. He said, "Russ Williams told me I had to come find your house, and I'm sorry to bother you." Well, he found it, and then Larry, that's the first time Larry knew what he was supposed to be doing, see. My God, he'd traveled a long ways. Pat told me later, she said, "I was here in the hospital with something, and somebody pounded on the door and went out the front, and here's this very handsome young man out there standing." She could go along with the program very well. And then we started having them. And I don't think they're doing it.
Well, probably not, but you know, I learned that early. Yes, I did, and I saw the benefit of it. Because what I learned in that exercise was, if you get the basics down, you can apply them in any environment.
Okay.
Yeah, if you get the basics,
If
if
you
you
get
get
the
those sequential basics about sensory awareness and using,
And so he didn't like the Veterans Administration, but it was not the medical side. We were in the medical side. But that was Father Tom, and so he was pretty sure that the VA being what it was, we weren't going to be successful at Hines. I think I really think he felt we would fail. Well, of course, according to Warren, everybody else in the United States thought we were going to fail too, except me and Warren. And Warren wasn't too sure, but I was too naive to know better. And I didn't think we went out there to fail. And Dr. Carroll didn't think so. He ran the place. And
what you said you were gonna set out to do, I mean, what you guys planned to do was just a millennium beyond what had been done before. And then to try to do it in an administration like the VA, which is known to be a large snail, was really something else.
you know, and you know, the Almighty upstairs must have been looking after us, because we were into circumstances where coming in like we were, neophytes, and not knowing how to draw up a budget or learning how the supply service run, all that kind of thing, and to have our people want to have a circular saw in the shop,
Yeah.
to have to get down here across these streets down here, and to, well, but you know, the evolution of that thing is quite nice. In '58, then no, it was '59, I was going to go to Washington, and they had a going away tea deal. It was big, gee, across that big that day, because our blind center had gotten to be known around the hospital very well by then. Everybody knew. So it's been 11 years. L.H. Gunnar had been acting director or deputy director for a long time in there. And he said this, and I recorded it, but it was on the disc, one of those old time
Oh, yeah.
discs, and I don't know whatever happened to it.
I've seen those.
Gunnar said that day, he said, and this blind program has brought this hospital more genuinely good publicity than the rest of the programs put together. He said that, and I had it recorded. Now listen, we had changed from, in 11 years, it had changed from being something, as Warren put it in some of his writing, people thought we would not last 6 months. That the school people, the VA people, didn't think we would last. And in 11 years, we had developed a lot. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I think the people that went through the program were the legacy.
I think.
The guys that went through there and went back home and got jobs, traveled independently, took care of their families, lived as citizens, all of us would. That was the legacy of Hines.
Now that is what we were there for, wasn't it? Wasn't it? That was what we were there for. And I kind of think we knew it. We knew it. And and once we would see these fellas come on and be, well, they just didn't know things. Would come from, well, we had them as far away as Manila, and quite a lot from down in the islands, I can't think what's the island that belongs to the United States down there.
Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico and all around and so on. And to see them, success we knew had to be right away and not artificial. It had to be pretty quick. And with them, so that was, we wanted that success to come quickly, where he might have been looking for us to pull a boob so that he could blame it on us and go home and get away with it. We didn't want that to happen so that he could blame us for a boob. Sometimes we had to, the drivers would pick somebody up at an airport and make a boob. We had to remedy that in a hurry. But then to watch just how that thing seemed to flower as he'd go along. And we'd have staff meeting, you've been in them out there.
Oh, yes.
And then we would say, we would be going over some fella. They'd say, yeah, he's over the hump now. We knew what that meant, is that he was going in the same direction that the staff working with him wanted him to go in. It was, and that was terribly important. Then it wasn't the struggle.
I saw that even in 1962 when I was there as an intern. I would see guys who had been there 10, 11, 12, 14 weeks, and they were supporting some of the newcomers. The guys that came in felt lost, really wondered if it was worth it. Could they do it? They were afraid that they were going to have to try, and that maybe they couldn't do it. And the guys that had been there several weeks sounded like staff members, supporting them along. Yeah. They were over the hump.
They were over the hump, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And say, this is part of our lore too. Wolfie, who was our janitor.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a black man from South Side, and he had to get up at 3:30 to make it to work, because he had to take every kind of a public transportation to get there and so on. But we everybody liked Wolfie, and he just was part of it. If you happened to find a quarter on the floor someplace, he'd turn it in, and just all kinds of things. Well, somebody was around, and there was a guy from South Carolina, a little black boy, and he was giving us trouble too, in every way, shape, and form. And somebody was right back in the back there near this guy's room, and you heard Wolfie saying, "Now look here, these men are your friends." Now, if them Oreos tell you that he wants you to do something, you do it. He was giving him a counseling there. I don't know who's overhear it, but they did. And Wolfie was a part of the team. Oh dear.
I think that's great. That's a good example that everybody felt like they were part of it.
Yeah, and yeah, everybody did, and that was a wonderful experience, and something that the VA was very proud of. With it. And you know, when that turned and went over to the university programs, and you were the first one of them in there, you know, that couldn't have happened 6, 7 years back. The country wasn't ready for it. We left that week.
Probably so. Yeah.
HEW with Lou and Mary Switzer and others, it just couldn't have flown.
I don't think so.
No, it wouldn't. Then of course you guys had to come along and prove it when you were in there.
That must have been a scary time for you, the rest of you pioneers, because you said, Good Lord, we're gonna turn it over to these young sprouts?
Well, I suppose it was. And we did have some 8-balls, but any university program does,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
but I think what made it a success is that the same standards were carried through. It was the same sequential training.
Yes, it was.
And there was no variation.
Mhm.
Because if you keep changing it, it's like 30 people in a room passing a story around. By the time it gets to the end, you don't even know what the original
Yes,
story
I'll
was.
say that distortion is tremendous. And well, I tell you, that history shows that up to Rod, because the program was approved for Boston College, and they didn't know what they were there for. And it took now I never met this man. It was Rory Cook. He was a district man for health, education, and welfare, we called it then. And somebody must have put him on track of it, and he dropped in at Boston College and looked around and said, they're not doing what you think they're supposed to be doing. He reported back to Central, and they weren't, and that was Father Carroll's fault. He was trying to make administrators,
Oh.
and that wasn't what that was for. And by gosh, then George Mallinson came along. George came along and set up Western, and George offered me that job up at Western. Well, I'm not a university man, and I knew it. And then I told him that I was not a university man, and appreciated that all right, but I would help him hunt somebody.
That's where Don Blush came.
That's where Don came in. And you know, it was a tough one because Kay Gruber and Bledsoe, they didn't particularly care for Don. And they never did, actually. All right? But the point was, they were all strong Stanley supporters. Well, this has got to be in history, all right? Because both Kay Gruber and Warren were looking at Hines as an orientation and mobility center. And it was more than that. And all the time we were there, the people who were working on the writing stuff and in the manual skills stuff, well, I had to work very hard to keep people from thinking they were subordinates. And I just never would do it. I simply wouldn't do it. It was, these people were equal people and so on. Well, then I had to get it square with Stan. Well, but Don was halfway between the masters and the doctorate. If he'd had money enough, he'd have been, going on to the doctorate. But he was above the master's level. Well, I knew that we'd have trouble having these people come out, and they have to deal with social workers, medical doctors, and all kinds of people with upper degrees. And they're going to treat you like dirt under their feet, huh? That's why I went hard for that program being a master's degree program.
Yeah.
And I just knew that it wouldn't fly very well if it was stayed at the undergraduate level.
Mm-hmm. And I think that was proven right, no question.
I believe it was, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
The successes of the program, again,
Yes.
were the proof of that.
Yes, and but it was Stanley was they would have had Stanley go. Well, that would have beaten it. See, and of course Stanley was at the undergraduate level then. He got higher than that later. But we're talking about the beginning. And, gosh sakes,
So you helped him find Don.
oh dear.
But you know, you were kind of good at helping them find people, weren't you? Didn't you help the State Department find somebody to go to Vietnam?
He's told that story
Huh?
so many times.
I
Nobody
did-
else would touch it with a 10-foot pole?
And I tell you that was the finest thing. Now I'm gonna tell it my way.
Uh-oh.
There was there was a lady who had been a teacher in the schools of one of the southeastern Asian countries. Don't remember what it was. She came back to this country. Now the Japanese had allowed her to go ahead with the teaching.
Oh,
Shh.
Genevieve Caulfield.
I believe mine was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it was. Anyway, she came back and she went up to the administrator's office. That was Bill Driver. And I don't even know if I'd met Bill Driver by then. But anyway, so the word came down that she had said, now you have these people working with blind people and they're good. Now just why can't you arrange to have somebody, one of these workers, to go to Vietnam and help them get square with their problem? So I got a call from up there, and it was, I don't think anybody thought there was anything going to come of this. And this is in the afternoon. So I talked to Don, and he said, I understand Rod Kossick might be ready to move. Okay, so I called Rod and explained the whole thing. You said, I'll call you back tonight. So later tonight, you called and said, I'll do it. The next morning, the impossible happened. I called his administrator's office, says, I got your man. I remember after a while the word went up and down the halls up there. This is later. Well, first of all, those two gals from State Department, you probably met both of them.
Oh,
Yeah. But anyway, later, Dr. Tim was the head of psychiatry. And I'd gotten to know him quite well because I wanted to set up these clinics where the people who were way advanced in age or who had a psychiatric component in their life. And he helped me with that. And so we were pretty good. One day he came by and he said, here, the man going to Vietnam, yeah. He said, can that man see? And I said, yeah. He said, boy, I'm glad. Oh, yes, he was glad he would have sent a blind man over there to get that, boy, oh boy, that wouldn't have lasted long.
Well, Russ, that was an experience of a lifetime. It's something that will never be duplicated. I don't know what's ahead for us, but I can tell you that was really the experience of a lifetime. So I can't thank you enough.
Well, I know it, but there was only one person in the United States who would have done that, not you. And, you know, that's true, too, as you look over everybody. Yeah.
Even Father Carroll, who hated the Vietnam War so much, he wrote me support.
Oh, did he?
He did.
I'm so glad to hear that, yes.
He told me after I got back, he said, I was more scared for you over there than you were yourself. Russ, over the years, there's one thing that I've noticed many times, and that is when people come into the field with no sense of history or how it developed, and particularly the problems that programs have faced with administrators, with the public, just with anybody that we deal with, in terms of the need for specialized services for blind persons, you know, why can't cane travel be taught by an occupational therapist? Or why can't the music teacher do that when she's not busy? And over, I see people who don't have a sense of history of those pitfalls and the battles that were waged to keep those specialized services. How do you think people might have a greater sense of what's involved here, and how might they get in touch with the roots of the field so that they can share that?
Well, I think what you're doing now is one of the ways at the AAR. Because you're talking about history when you're there. Yeah. But now Steve insists that Bill Weiner isn't teaching history at Western, but I'm not sure Steve knew. But if they're not going to do it there, you're kind of in trouble. I mean, in these university programs.
Yes, that's what it has to be.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not sure I told you this, I might have. Steve was pretty sure, and he's trying to be in touch with all these places, that down where Larry was, down at Cal State of Los Angeles, Larry was out there and had a program going. I didn't think the next man that replaced him was very good. But anyway, Steve didn't think anything was going on there in the way of history at all. Well, about 2 weeks ago, I might have told you this, but anyway, about 2 weeks ago, a guy that I'd been in high school with, we stayed out their house. He lives in Arcadia in Los Angeles, and his, say it's his great-grandson or somebody in the family, was doing this work with, going to school, had entered the program, going to school, to work with blind people. Well, this fellow, Wayne Cripe, said, well, I know a guy that's done that for years. Who's Williams. Now his cousin, or I mean whatever his relative was, mentioned the Williams. Why he did it, I don't know. It was somebody that they were talking about. Now, they were doing a little bit of history there. I'll have to check that again with Cripe to make sure I get it right. But otherwise, my name would not have come up. That's where it happened.
Okay.
And if I get the story right, well, I hope it did, but I'm not sure that it was right. Now, I went down to, Gene and I went down to a year ago, this past winter, to Tallahassee, and they have a program down there, University, Florida State, and I can't think of his name. Was the head of the program, Porky Ponder. I've heard his name at Western.
Okay.
Yeah. And I got in touch with him. And we came over and we talked a while. And then I went over later to his class, some way or another, and made sure he had some stuff. And so by the time we went back this year, Gene and I went over and talked to his class. Oh, weren't you though? Anyway, so Porky is trying to get history into his program.
I think that's really critical. Probably one of the best things that we've got right now is Steve Mayagawa's book, The Journey to Excellence.
I know, it's about all we have, isn't it?
Yeah, in terms of covering this,
Yeah.
the things we've been talking about here.
Yeah.
He did a marvelous job. There's information.
I think he did, didn't he?
There's information in there I've never seen before, and that surprised me.
Yes.
There's a lot of it. And I think that book should go into the hands of every student. It should be required reading.
I do too. Yes, I do too. And there isn't any central, now you know this better than I do, there isn't any central authority, maybe in Washington, as there was back when we were
That's right.
knocking around, Lou and Miss Ritzer, stuff like that. There isn't any now, is there?
No.
I
Not
knew
in the
you'd
federal
know,
level.
and I wasn't for sure, but I thought there wasn't. So there isn't any way to try to pipeline it from a central position. Now, somebody told me down Garner, who he can't call shots either, in VA. That's where he is, the job I used to have.
Right.
Yeah. And down at, where's Pete flying going out south? Down-
Puerto Rico? No.
No.
Bahamas somewhere?
No, he was, where he flying out of.
Oh, Fort Lauderdale.
Well, there's some place down there that has a program of small things. And the word was that the guy, the director of the hospital, who could hire who he darn pleases, had hired somebody who was a friend of his. He didn't know anything. Well, no, that doesn't know work too well.
I've got an idea. What we're doing now is chapter 1. And so every summer, I will come to northern Wisconsin and we'll do another chapter.
Northern Minnesota.
Minnesota, yeah. Wisconsin first, talk to the old folks, and then come to Minnesota.
I think that'd be a good idea, Ron. We can work that out. We can work that out some way. And if Gene and I are going back and forth, could stop in on you, which you've invited us to do. We never have done that. But I think that is something that we really ought to do. And say, looking at the books and thinking and so on, is to get down those things that would need to be stressed.
Yes.
Steve thought that he might want to do another book oriented toward, let's say, philosophy and I don't know what all. Things that might have been missed in this book. About the only say. But he'll depend on me for quite a bit on that. You and Jay Whitehead.
Oh, Jay is great.
Yeah, see, but I think they're probably doing what you're suggesting is a way to get launched too, because it might not be too easy to get going. One is this, and it's the use of blindfold, because it has more enemies than it has friends.
It sure does.
And yet, you've done it in all kinds of ways, and Jay has too. And I did it when we first got people, and we did it with the visitors too that used to come. And well, and to put down the factors that are involved in why do you do this? And I think we can work it out and get it going. I think Gene Apple, or at least Steve blames Gene, and I think I put the thought in his head. Because I never thought Gene was a very good center chief, see, I never did. He didn't find it easy to confront a blind person. He would delegate. He did this more noticeably when he was out in California than he did at Hines. I didn't know at Hines, see, but I witnessed it firsthand when he was in California. He would delegate it. And there comes a time Ron, when you in the positions you served in, and the ones that I was in, you can't delegate certain things.
Absolutely.
You just can't do it. And that day Lloyd Wiederberg, his guy hit the front of the bus with a cane. No way Lloyd could have handled that. Not that he lacked the ability to handle it, the position wasn't right. And so it fell to me to tell him, I'm not going to sign your accident report. That's the way. There was no accident involved. He was just using his cane like you use your eyes. He spotted the bus with that cane, and that's the way it was.
And that's absolutely critical, that they would see it that way and they would accept it as such.
Yeah, well, they had to, because I wouldn't sign it.
Well,
I don't know. But it's that thing, what I'm saying, is that and then Warren did this. There was a write-up having to do with centers. It was in the Blindness annual one time, and it was supposed to be a question and answer thing. Warren dredged it out of something that I worked on to, it was a talk down in Virginia, the University of Richmond, I think, or something, doesn't matter. But Steve has it in the back of his book in the appendix. And it was, there were a number of points. And those could be embellished or straightened out. And back in the back of that Steve's book, and I were at the point that I don't remember what they were. But
I think that could be the kernel for chapter 2.
might, yeah, that sort of thing, huh?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And you know, we've covered this afternoon a great chunk of history. I think we deserve a break.
I do too, because I'm beginning to not know, what's my name?
You really can't sit there and do that hour after hour. I don't care who you are. It's hard work.